Hello and welcome to the first tutorial, if you like, of processing in Lightroom. This month's project is a black and white photo of animal or animals. I'm just going to show you processing how I would do it in Lightroom, and then I'm going to show you how I would do it in Photoshop. This is a photo that, or these are photos that I took from many years ago when I was in the Maldives of a hermit crab. So I'm just going to select one at random, and I like this one here. So this is the import. I would have gone to import here, selected the location of where I wanted to draw the files from, and it just loads them in here. So I've got this highlighted here, and I'm just going to go to develop up here, and then it's going to give me the image. Okay, so what I'm going to do straight away is I'm going to crop the image because there's an awful lot of negative space around, and because of the amazing detail that we've got here, I didn't actually shoot this with a macro lens, but I was using a telephoto lens, which enabled me to get a real close-up shot. And I think if I crop it a little bit, I'll just make it a lot better, and we can really see what we're looking at. So I'm just going to crop it in slightly, not too much. There we go, and I'm just going to return that. There, so this is just the cropping tool here. We've got all kinds of settings in here, but I just wanted to manually crop it, and that should be fine. Now, one thing about Lightroom, which isn't the same in Photoshop, is that this is non-destructive. So any adjustments that we do within Lightroom, it doesn't actually damage the original photo. The original photo is still the original photo, and so you can go back at any time and change your settings or reset right back to the original one and redevelop it however you like. So okay, here's the crop that we've actually I just want to just move this slightly into the middle. There we go. So this is the crop we're going to do. You can see that this here is very much in focus as with this area, and that's because I was using a very shallow field aperture. So by design it was supposed to have this line here of absolute focus, because you can actually see individual grains of sand there. It's phenomenal. There is a slight bit of fuzz on the edges. That's because the little creature was moving, but I still think that it's a great shot, and you know, it's still got a lot of detail there, and this little bit of fuzzing to me gives the sense of a little bit of movement as well. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go to black and white. Notice that this is a color image, and we're just going to go into black and white, and straight away it's very different. Obviously, just completely desaturated it. So I'm going to adjust highlights straight away. I'm going to bring those highlights down, and what it does is anything that's white is going to be blown out. Now you see these dots here. We've got one here and we've got one there. I've got this little thing here that shows highlight clipping. So whenever it's absolutely brilliant light, it loses detail, so there's no detail in these areas. It's just absolute white, and I've put this filter on that will show me, because I never want to have anything blown out, overexposed in white. It never looks good. So that's what that is. But I'm going to move it down, because what this is going to do is it's going to bring out detail. So if you're looking in this area here, you can see it's quite light, but if I bring this down, you can start to see a little bit more detail here and there. So probably going to bring that down to about 80, and then this one here, the shadows, I'm going to bring the shadows up, because I want to see see if you pay attention to this area here, I want to see more detail in that area. So this was like what it was, and I'm going to lift that up a little bit, and it just gives a little bit more. You can see a bit more of the leg here, so just lightening it up and getting a nicer image. So those are the only two I'm going to start with. I always start with these. I might put that up to about 2. Just you know, the clarity, it deals with all the midtones and things like that. Especially with color, you never really boost up the clarity too much. You know, if I boosted mine up to 6, it would be quite rare. So I just go just a tiny bit, just to make it just give a little bit more pop. It's almost like a little bit of, for me, it's like using a little bit more sharpening, really. This tonal curve, I'm not going to bother moving it myself, you would just go into it like this, and then I would click and drag and manipulate the tonal curve like that. Normally you have to have what's known as a nice S curve, so it would start up higher here and then go down and then curve, and just like an S. I'm just going to use the presets here, which are the point curves. And because this is a black and white photo, let's try and go for medium. Now there is a huge difference between what I just did and what that is. You can see that the colors pop a little bit more. The blacks are a little more black and the whites are a little bit more white. I like that because we've got quite a bit of mid-tone grays as well in here, which would have been the orange. If we go to strong contrast, again, makes it pop even more, and I think you can get away with using more of a strong contrast. As you can see, there's a slight S in here, a bit more of the curve at the bottom, not so much at the top. We could maybe push that slightly, and actually I think I might leave it like that because I like that we've got quite a bit of tone in the darks, as well as we've got a nice bit of whites on the top, and we come back and we adjust those at the end of the process, or at least that's what I do. So okay, so we've gone through the highlights and shadows. Now we've done the tonal curve. We can adjust the colors, but it's I would only do that with like sky pictures and stuff like that. I mean, like you can see if I'm a red, because I know that this was like orange and stuff, so if I'm messing around with the red, you can actually see you know, it is affecting, but there's no red in the picture. Well, no, there's no red in the picture, but we've only desaturated it. All that data, all that color data is still in the photo, and so that's really good to mess around with in the future. But I find it really works with skies and stuff like that. So you desaturate the blue and the sky pops, and the clouds become more pronounced. If I push, you know, really deep red in, it can give me a bit more tonal maybe. Actually, I kind of like that, so I put it to -40, and it seemed to really highlight this area, because this is what it was. By pushing that down, yeah, it made it a little bit, just put a few more of those shadows back in to really emphasize this, you know, the mouth area here. So I kind of like that. It's looking pretty good already, because I try not to push the photo too much. So with sharpening here, so I'll have this part here. So what I do is I push it up a little bit, so maybe go to like 60, and this will affect all the lines and stuff in the picture. But then I always touch up the luminance as well, because if you look in this area here and I push the sharpening too much, you can see it goes really kind of horrid, and you know, every little random pixel there is being sharpened, and we don't want that. So what we do, I'll put that back down to 60, and we use this luminance. And what that does is it gets rid of the noise. So if I put it right up, you can see that it's smoothed it right out. And normally now when you take a selfie, you have that filter that kind of smooths out your skin, and it looks terrible because it looks like you're a cartoon character. So I don't like using that at all. So what I want to do is I still want a little bit of grain, but I'm just going to smooth it out slightly. And I feel that is a little bit too much. Actually, that might be all right. So you can see here the cross section here of detail within the photo, and I think that looks all right. So I'm going to go down to here, and I'm going to click that. Now, in all fairness, I don't know what that does. I haven't bothered researching it, but I saw someone clicking it every time once on YouTube, so I just click it. But this one here is very important. Because there's metadata stored in every file of every photo that you take, and it will give information to things like Lightroom. So if I click this, you'll see that it changed, and what it's done is it knows that I took it with Canon, and I took it with a Canon 55 to 250 millimeter lens. What that's done is it's corrected it, because it knows that that lens will bend the light a certain way because of the thickness and the can't think of the word, but the amount that the glass in the lens is kind of curved. And so if you say you took a picture of a building, the lines on that building would not be absolutely straight. You would only really see it if you were really examining the photo, but it can be annoying if you've got a horizon or something, and the horizon looking over the ocean is supposed to be flat, and you've got this little bit of a fisheye curve in it. So what that would do is it knows how much light was restricted from coming in through the lens, and it knows how much curvature was in the lens, and it just corrects that. So that's why it jumped up in its brightness as well slightly. So I would always click that. If you're not sure, it might not know what you took, and there's a whole load of cameras here, and you've even got Apple and Apple phones and iPads and stuff like that. It's all in there. And that's nearly it. I'd like to put a vignette on. So normally I put a bit of a dark vignette, and what that does is it darkens the sides here, and it draws your attention into the middle, which is normally lighter, and that helps. What I feel my personal style is that it would make it pop a little bit more and draw your attention in. But I'm not so sold on it being in a dark on black and white, because the reason why this is red is as I've got this clipping on, and so it tells me what's completely white and blown out. I can turn that off here. But you could go the other way and put a white clipping mask on as opposed to the black one, and I think it would just be as effective because it kind of just smooths out the edges here and gives it doesn't have the same, with it, if these were dark and this was light, that would draw you in. But on this, because it's smoothed out the edges, I find that it too is drawing your attention into the middle, which is the only thing with lines and is in focus because it's taken out anything distracting here. But in all fairness, there was nothing distracting as in the photo anyway, because all we have is this line of sand here, and that's not very distracting. In fact, it gives a nice platform for the hermit crab to be walking along. So I'm just going to actually just put a little bit, about 20 on that, like that, just to give it a bit of mood. I'm not quite sure what would be good. Normally I use the dark, and that's why I've gone for that, but I reckon you could use the lighter one as well. Right, up to the top again. So this is where we did the highlights and the shadows. I'm going to mess around with the whites and the blacks, but first I might just bring this down a little bit, and I'm going to underexpose it slightly. I'm not sure why. I just think I just want a little bit more detail. Because I took this in a raw file, I can take it right down, to black, but there's still lots of detail. You can see if I take it down to nearly 3 points, you can actually see like more detail in the sand. And you take it up, obviously you lose detail, but I think I want to take it down just a little bit, just to again make the or accentuate the colors here, because we're only working with black and white, and there's a little bit of grays, but I think it just seems a little bit more moody to me, just to have it just a little bit darker. Okay, so with the whites, there's a nice little shortcut you can do here to make sure it's exposed properly, is you hold down the shift key and you double click on the word whites. What that does is it makes sure that it puts in the histogram up here, the whites are right up again here. Nothing is overexposed. And actually, having said that, it is a little bit overexposed. You can see here with the red clipping. Normally it works with a color photograph, but it looks like we're going to have to do it manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Alt key, and when I click on this slider here, the screen's going to go completely black, I think. Yeah. And as you can see where all the overexposed parts are. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this slider down until not one of those white spots are in the black, and then that will tell us that now there is not one item of this image that is overexposed and blown out. And you can definitely tell because that clipping, that red, is not anywhere on the image. And then we're going to do the same with the black, but I couldn't do that. Hold down shift, and I'm going to click on black, and it's going to put the blacks down. And if I hold Alt and go onto the slider, you can see that there's a little bit there. Now that's fine. For me, that's totally fine. I don't mind having a bit of black because I feel it gives it more depth. But if we have a little bit too much, it's going to undo all our work in this area here when we move the shadows up. So what I'm going to do is, okay, I might actually adjust the exposure a little bit and go back towards the start. Because I'm not quite sold. Okay, so that's still underexposed. We're still at minus 0.12, but I felt that when it was exposed on the original exposure, I felt that it was just a little bit too bright, and I kind of like this. Now we could go in and we can adjust the whites again, because you can see there by bringing up the focus, we've actually got a dot here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just bring that slightly until that's disappeared, and then with the blacks, I'm going to leave them how they are, because I feel that gives us a real nice, there's lots of clarity here, there's lots of detail, but I feel that it really is giving a great impression, and it's nice and dark, and it's a black and white image, but there's still loads of, we've got hairs on its legs. It's absolutely great.